The dystopian world of Fallout has a great range of post-apocalyptic societies. From Roman cosplayers to crazy technology cults, there's something for everyone. But while at a first glance each group in post-apocalyptic America seems as varied and unique as the next, really, they fall into 7 main types. Don't believe me? Well, join me today as we look at the 7 types of society in the Fallout universe. The first type of society we'll take a look at might be the first thing you think about when you hear the words post-apocalyptic. I'm talking leather straps, cage fighting, mohawks. Whatever this guy was doing, the whole Raider Kingdom vibe. These guys are hierarchical, with a huge cast of slaves doing the majority of the actual hard work at the bottom of society, and then tiers of raiders and bosses above that. And they're always looking to expand for more loot, land, slaves, and warriors. For examples in the games of this type of society, you have the Nuka World Raiders, and Kaiser's Legion as the 2 major ones, but pretty much any group of raiders big enough fits the bill. While levels of discipline vary widely in this type, the leader's power always comes from fear. This also makes it one of the least stable types of society, with the removal of 1 or 2 key players causing the whole thing to crumble like a house of cards. And now, from the evil Raider Kingdoms to the guys who are kind of okay as far as societies in the Wasteland go, the Democratic Republics, like the NCR and Diamond City. These guys have all the good stuff we used to have in the old world. Democracy, laws, taxes.
Why in the world did you attack President Kimball? Understandable.
And are basically the starting point for getting the world back on track. Their leaders are elected and rule with the consent of the people, and they usually bring stability to the region. Though this also means they have to deal with all the problems of the old world too, often with high degrees of corruption and bureaucracy clogging up their governments, but also the problems of the new world as well, like super mutants. These societies are usually the most tolerant though, always accepting new members and being tolerant of a variety of ideologies and groups. Well, to a degree. Looking at you, ghouls being kicked out of Diamond City. But what if all that freedom is just getting in the way of effective leadership? Now we look to the next type of post-apocalyptic society, the authoritarian organization, like the Enclave and the Institute. Many of the Vault societies also started out in this category too, especially in the early years, but many have mellowed out over the centuries. These groups are headed by very strong leadership, with basically no accountability, and nearly complete control over the groups they're in charge of. And let's not forget, lots of cameras and security checkpoints to make sure they remain in control. One of the defining features of this type of society is the desire to keep the outsiders from getting in, and the people inside from getting out. These societies usually exist in underground bunkers or other out-of-the-way locations, like oil rigs, and tend to run incredibly well, right up until the point they don't. This is usually because they fall into the default bad guy role, and being one of the most common factions to be targeted by the player character. But sometimes you do have to wonder, it's hard to argue with their results. And if that was far too much government, let's enjoy some freedom with our next type of society, the Libertarian Homesteads. Examples of this are the Commonwealth Minutemen settlements and the West Virginian Free States. This society is usually a voluntary alliance of individual farms and settlements who work together out of a common interest, but not too closely together, remaining self-sufficient and free to leave if they no longer see the group as beneficial. These groups enjoy the most freedom of any group, but also receive the least guaranteed assistance of any group. And unless you actually listened to Preston every time he told you how another settlement needs your help, they didn't even get that. But sometimes working together closely is just what a group wants, especially if they're doing it for a noble cause. Which brings us to our next type of society, the communal collective. Like Boston's Railroad and the followers of the apocalypse. This type of society is usually filled with do-gooders and hippies, focused around a common goal, like saving synths or rebuilding civilization. These groups aren't in it for the land or the money or the freedom, they're just in it to do the right thing. Obviously, not everyone in the Wasteland is on board with the lack of loot, so these groups tend to stay pretty small, and not last very long, but at least their hearts are in the right place. But what happens when the cause is more important than the rest of the world around it? When your group has a higher calling, and all that fighting for land and growing crops and trying to get human rights that the other societies are wasting their time with seem like entirely the wrong way to go about things. This brings us to the ideological orders of Fallout, usually involving a lot of old guys in robes and a bunch of fancy titles, like the Children of Atom and most depictions of the Brotherhood of Steel, but I'll mention more about them in a bit. These groups have a very strict code and a very clear us versus them mentality, with everyone either being inside of the group or out of it, and the ones inside the group know what's up. Other key aspects of these factions include somewhat of a distrust of outsiders, a sense of superiority, and an ideology which drives every decision the group makes. This category of society definitely inspires the most fanaticism in its followers, but also the most closed-minded thinking, creating some of the most interesting dynamics in Fallout's Wasteland. But in the beginning, didn't I say 7 types of society? And that's only 6. Well, now it's time for the most boring and middle-of-the-road type, the mixture. These societies don't fall into any of the extremes of the previous groups. Places like Good Neighbor, Megaton, Far Harbor, Good Springs, and a ton more. They have some mixture of ideologies and views of outsiders, and more often than not, their leader is just someone who naturally rose up among them as a natural fit for leader, with no actual qualifications or mandate for their leadership other than, well, they've done a pretty good job so far. Furthermore, besides a standout character or two, making them more memorable, these places don't tend to rank very highly on people's favourite factions lists, because they're kind of normalish and unremarkable as far as post-apocalyptic societies go. Speaking of favourite factions, let's circle back to the Brotherhood of Steel. Now, while I put the Brotherhood in the ideological order category, they might have come to mind when I was describing some of the other types of society too, like Raider Kingdom, Communal Collective, Authoritarian Organisation, or even the Mixture. They all share many aspects of the ways the Brotherhood has been presented over the years. The truth is, though, the Brotherhood is different every time it shows up, and different factions of it belong in different categories to different degrees. However, on average, and based on their roots, I feel ideological order is the best fit for them. Also, it helps to keep the chart simple. But before we wrap up, there is one society I haven't mentioned. All attempts to categorize this place have failed. It fulfills the characteristics of nearly every hexagon on my chart. Could this be the perfect society? Appealing to everyone, no matter their alignment or views. I am of course talking about the Republic of Dave, a small nation in the corner of Fallout 3's map. While at a first glance, from its free and fair elections, and its claim to be a republic, you might think, of course, it's a democratic republic, but it runs much deeper than that. With Dave having created almost a cult of personality around himself, and with the propaganda arm of an authoritarian government, he might be more suited at the bottom of my chart. But what's more, the citizens are free to do whatever they want, and the settlement is no bigger than any of the other Libertarian Homesteads in the games. And if that wasn't enough, since all the citizens are from a single family, and all the property belongs to that family, it's all communally owned. For the glory of Dave! Unified around the dream of Dave returning civilization to the wasteland. Not to mention it used to be the kingdom of Tom before Dave took over, and it's run pretty much the same way. Truly, the Republic of Dave is a political entity beyond categorization, and it has ruined my chart. Anyway, that's the video. And you just watched it, and you're not getting those minutes back, so I hope you enjoyed. Subscribe for more cutting-edge game analysis and other theories. Like the video if you liked it, and share the video with anyone who you think is interested in the politics of Fallout. And if you want to support the channel, buy my game on Steam. It's a comedic fantasy RPG called Quest, and it's available right now. Until next time, guys, goodbye!